28 matches, not a single loss since February 19th. And last night on the red clay of the Foro Italico, Jannik Sinner did something that even his most devoted believers didn't expect. He bent over his racket mid-match, visibly gassed, thigh-strapped, running on fumes, and still dismantled Daniil Medvedev in 3 sets. 6-2, 5-7, 6-4. That second number is the only blemish, and frankly, it's the most interesting part of this entire story. I want to talk about that second set because that's where the real analysis lives. Everyone's going to celebrate the win, nobody's going to interrogate the collapse. I am. Medvedev trailing 3-0 in the second didn't panic. He never panics. That's what makes him one of the most analytically dangerous players on tour. What he did instead was something I've watched him do against Novak Djokovic in 2021, against Rafael Nadal in Abu Dhabi, against Carlos Alcaraz in Doha. He started engineering exhaustion. He went full architect mode, drop shots dragging Sinner to the net, heavy cross-court ground strokes pulling him wide to his backhand side. He wasn't trying to hit winners. He was trying to fill Sinner's lungs with cement. And for about 40 minutes, it was working. I was looking at the tape, specifically the 4-4 game in the second set, and you can see Sinner's footwork start to betray him. The split step, which is normally timed to the millisecond, began arriving a fraction late. Not enough for the average viewer to notice. Enough for Medvedev to notice. He started serving out wide to Sinner's forehand on the deuce court, which sounds counterintuitive against a player with Sinner's forehand. But the logic is brutal. A fatigued Sinner hitting a forehand from a wide position generates far less inside-out pace, and Medvedev had the angles to redirect. He broke back, held, and took the set 7-5. That was elite level problem solving under pressure, and I think it deserves acknowledgement before we bury the man. Now here's the bit that actually bothers me about Sinner's night. The trainer timeout in the second set for his right thigh, because that's not a cramp. Cramps don't get you reaching for your racket as a crutch between points. That's a strain. That's muscular fatigue compounding on a pre-existing tightness, and I need everyone to sit with that for a second. Sinner played out a 3-set match against one of the most physically demanding players on the planet, a man who makes you run a marathon disguised as a tennis match, with a compromised right leg. The serve speed, the lateral movement, the ability to generate topspin RPM off his backhand and dictate rallies from the baseline, all of that requires a functioning right lower body. He was running on one engine, and he still won. The third set is where Sinner showed you what separates him from every other player in the world right now. Down 0-1 after the rain delay resumed on Saturday morning, a disruption that historically benefits the player who's mentally trailing, because fatigue resets and doubt has time to grow. Sinner immediately broke Medvedev's serve. And I want to be precise here. The break came off a bad bounce on clay, which some analysts will wave away as luck. It wasn't luck. Sinner created the conditions for that bad bounce by pushing Medvedev back with heavy topspin to the baseline, forcing a defensive reply that sat up mid-court. He manufactured that moment. That's not fortune. That's strategic suffocation. If you're a purist, you're going to hate this. But what Sinner has developed in the last 18 months is something that I don't think gets discussed enough in serious tennis circles. He has turned tactical patience into an offensive weapon. Most players use patience defensively to survive. Sinner uses patience to create geometry. He constructs points 3, 4, 5 balls out, engineering specific court positions so that by the time his forehand fires, his opponent isn't just beaten, they're standing exactly where Sinner needed them to be. It's chess played at 100 miles per hour. Now, here's where we need to talk about the historical weight crushing down on Sunday's final, because it is immense. Sinner wins this title, and he becomes only the second man in the history of professional tennis to complete the Masters 1000 set. Novak Djokovic is the only man who's done it. One player in the entire Open era. The fact that Sinner is standing on the doorstep of that achievement at 23 years old, that's not a storyline. That's a seismic shift in the narrative of this sport. And he's doing it on home soil in front of Italian President Sergio Mattarella with Adriano Panatta, the last Italian man to win Rome back in 1976, waiting to hand him the trophy. You cannot write this. This is beyond drama. And then there's the clay triple. Rafael Nadal in 2010 is the only man to win Monte Carlo, Madrid, and Rome in the same clay season. Sinner has already won Monte Carlo. He's already won Madrid. Rome is the final piece. If he closes it out Sunday, he joins the most singular clay court achievement in the modern era, authored by the greatest clay court player who ever lived. I want you to understand what that means. We're not talking about matching a journeyman's record. We're talking about matching Nadal on clay. In 2026, the opponent is Casper Ruud, and I'm going to be fair to him because I think the tennis media tends to underwrite his threat level. Ruud is a world-class clay court operator. His topspin forehand is a legitimate weapon. His serve has improved measurably in the last 18 months, and he held his nerve through a nearly 2-hour rain delay to dismantle Luciano Darderi 6-1, 6-1 on Friday, which is a ruthless scoreline against a home crowd favorite. Mental composure under external pressure is not something Ruud lacks, but here's where I genuinely think Ruud's situation is almost unfair. He faces a Sinner who has won all four of their career meetings without dropping a single set, four matches, zero sets conceded, including a 6-0, 6-1 demolition on this exact court last year. That is not a rivalry. That is a hierarchy, and Ruud knows it. He said so himself. Last year, he really routed me here on the same court. The psychological architecture of this final was already decided before the first ball is struck. Ruud has to somehow convince himself that four meetings and four losses mean nothing, while simultaneously playing in front of a crowd that is treating Sinner like a Roman emperor returning from conquest. I was looking at the tape from their 2024 Rome quarterfinal, and the 6-0 first set tells you everything. Ruud's first serve percentage collapsed under the weight of Sinner's return pressure. Sinner was picking up serves in the low 120s and redirecting them with such pace and precision that Ruud had no time to establish his forehand baseline game, which is his comfort zone, the place he operates from, the position from which he actually becomes dangerous. Sinner denied him that position in under 45 minutes. That's not winning a match. That's removing a player's identity. Now, here's the bit that actually interests me heading into Sunday. Sinner played a physically demanding three-set semifinal with a thigh issue. He's had less than 24 hours of recovery. Ruud had a 6-1, 6-1 walkover by comparison. On any other day, that physical disparity would be a genuine concern. But I've watched Sinner play through a hip injury at the Australian Open. I've watched him manage fatigue in five-set battles at the US Open. Physical adversity does not disrupt his tactical clarity. It might cost him a percentage point of serve speed, a fraction of lateral range. It will not cost him the match. The French Open looms 3 weeks after Rome. It is the only Grand Slam Sinner hasn't won. The red dust of Roland Garros is the final unconquered territory on his map. And if he walks into Paris next month having completed the Masters 1000 set, having swept the clay triple, having extended his winning streak past 29, the psychological pressure on the rest of the draw becomes suffocating. Alexander Zverev is dangerous on that surface. Carlos Alcaraz is out with a wrist injury, which removes the one player who genuinely had Sinner's number on clay last year. The runway is clear. My prediction for the next 3 months is this: Sinner wins Rome on Sunday. He enters Roland Garros as the most dominant active player in men's tennis. He reaches the final. And in that final, assuming Zverev or Ruud is across the net, Sinner wins his first French Open title. The era isn't coming. It's already here, and the rest of the tour is only now beginning to understand that. Every coach, every analyst, every player sitting in a locker room right now looking at that 28-match winning streak knows the same brutal truth. The gap between Jannik Sinner and the rest of the field isn't closing. It's widening. Casper Ruud said he's going to try to stop him. I respect that. I genuinely do. But trying to stop Sinner right now on clay at home, chasing history with a nation watching, is like trying to stop a tide with your hands. You can slow it for a moment. You cannot stop it. The red dust of Rome has seen half a century of Italian heartbreak in this event. On Sunday, that ends.